The gunshot that killed her father echoed through Zelda Brennan's mind, even as she collapsed against the water trough outside the Mercantile in Gunnison, Colorado. Her vision swimming with black spots and her stomach cramping so violently she could barely breathe. It had been 4 days since she had eaten anything more substantial than the few berries she had found growing wild near the creek, and 6 weeks since consumption had taken her mother, leaving Zelda alone with a grief-stricken father who had drunk himself into a stupor one night and picked a fight with the wrong man. She was 20 years old, completely alone in the world and starving. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of Gunnison in July of 1883, and Zelda could feel the heat radiating up from the wooden boards beneath her knees. She had tried to find work, had knocked on every door in town, but no one wanted to hire a woman with no references, no family, and no skills beyond the basic household tasks her mother had taught her. The landlord had evicted her from their small rented room 3 days ago, and she had been sleeping in an abandoned shed near the edge of town, trying to stay out of sight and praying that something would change. "Miss, you all right there?" The voice was deep and concerned, and Zelda looked up through her tangled blonde hair to see a man crouching beside her. He was tall even in his crouch, with broad shoulders stretching the fabric of his dusty shirt, and his face was tanned and weathered in a way that spoke of years spent outdoors. His dark hair curled slightly at the edges beneath his hat, and his brown eyes held genuine worry as he studied her face. "When did you last eat?" Zelda tried to speak, but her throat was so dry that only a rasp came out. The man frowned and stood, disappearing into the Mercantile for a moment before returning with a dipper of water. He held it to her lips carefully, supporting her head with his other hand, and Zelda drank gratefully, feeling the cool liquid slide down her parched throat. "Easy now, not too fast," he said gently. "You will make yourself sick if you drink too quick after going without." He pulled the dipper back slightly, waiting for her to catch her breath. "My name is Zachary Vaughn. I own a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Now, I am going to ask you again, and I would appreciate an honest answer. When did you last eat a proper meal?" Zelda felt tears prickling at her eyes, and she hated herself for the weakness. "I do not remember," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "A week, maybe more. I had some berries yesterday morning, but before that." She trailed off, shame burning in her chest. Zachary's jaw tightened and he stood, offering her his hand. "Can you stand?" When she nodded and took his hand, he pulled her up gently, steadying her when she swayed. "The restaurant is just across the street. You are going to come with me, and you are going to eat something, and then we are going to figure out how to fix this situation. No arguments." Zelda wanted to protest, wanted to maintain some shred of dignity, but her stomach chose that moment to cramp again, and she found herself nodding instead. Zachary kept his hand on her elbow as they crossed the street, and she was grateful for the support because her legs felt like they might give out at any moment. The other people on the street stared as they passed, and Zelda could feel their judgment burning into her skin, but Zachary seemed oblivious to it, his attention focused entirely on getting her to the restaurant. The smell of food hit her the moment they stepped inside, and Zelda's mouth watered so intensely it was almost painful. The restaurant was small but clean, with checked tablecloths on the tables and a kindly-looking woman behind the counter. The woman's expression shifted from welcoming to concerned when she saw Zelda's condition. "Zachary Vaughn, what have you brought me?" the woman asked, but her tone was more worried than accusatory. "That girl looks half-starved. Sit her down quickly now." Zachary guided Zelda to a table by the window and pulled out a chair for her. "Clara, we need some food, but nothing too heavy to start. Some broth, maybe, and some bread." Clara was already moving toward the kitchen. I will bring out some chicken soup and biscuits." Poor thing looks like a strong wind would blow her over. She disappeared through a doorway, and Zelda heard the clatter of pots and dishes. Zachary sat down across from Zelda, removing his hat and setting it on the table. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight gray threaded through his dark hair at the temples. He was probably in his late 20s, she guessed, maybe 30 at most. There was something solid and dependable about him, something that made her want to trust him even though she knew better than to trust anyone after the past few weeks. "What is your name?" he asked gently, and Zelda realized she had not told him yet. "Zelda Brennan," she said quietly. "My father was Thomas Brennan. He died 6 weeks ago in a fight outside the saloon. My mother died of consumption 2 weeks before that. I have been trying to find work, but—" She trailed off, not wanting to admit how desperate she had become. Zachary's expression softened with sympathy. "I heard about Thomas. I am sorry for your loss, both your losses." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "What kind of work were you looking for?" "Anything," Zelda said honestly. "I can cook and clean and sew. I am good with animals. I am willing to learn anything else that needs learning. But no one will hire me because I have no references and no family to vouch for me." The bitterness in her voice surprised her, but she was too tired and hungry to hide it. Clara appeared with a tray, setting down a bowl of steaming soup and a plate of golden biscuits. The smell was so good that Zelda felt dizzy with longing. "You eat slow now, dear," Clara said kindly. "Your stomach has probably shrunk, and you do not want to overwhelm it all at once." Zelda picked up the spoon with a trembling hand, bringing it to her lips. The first taste of the soup was like heaven, rich and savory with bits of chicken and vegetables floating in the broth. She wanted to gulp it down, to shovel it into her mouth as fast as possible, but she forced herself to take small sips, mindful of Clara's warning. Each spoonful seemed to ease the ache in her belly just a little, and she could feel tears sliding down her cheeks without her permission. "It is all right," Zachary said quietly. "Take your time. There is no rush." Zelda ate slowly, breaking off small pieces of biscuit and dipping them in the soup to soften them. Her stomach, which had forgotten what it felt like to be properly fed, began to awaken gradually, the gnawing emptiness easing bit by bit. Zachary sat across from her in patient silence, occasionally taking a sip from the coffee that Clara had brought him, but mostly just watching to make sure she was all right. When the bowl was half empty, Zelda set down her spoon, her stomach feeling pleasantly full for the first time in what felt like forever. "I cannot eat any more right now," she admitted, "but thank you. I do not know how I can ever repay you for this." "You do not need to repay me," Zachary said. "But I do have a proposition for you if you are willing to hear it." He leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but kind. "I need someone to help run my household. My housekeeper left 3 months ago to live with her daughter in Denver, and I have been managing on my own, but honestly, the place is falling apart. I need someone who can cook and clean and help with the general running of things. The pay would be $30 a month, plus room and board. You would have your own room in the house and 3 meals a day. If you are interested, the job is yours." Zelda stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You do not even know me," she said slowly. "How do you know I would not steal from you or cause trouble?" Zachary smiled slightly. "I am a pretty good judge of character, and I do not think you are the type to cause trouble. Besides, I am willing to take the risk if you are willing to take the job. What do you say?" Zelda felt fresh tears welling up, but this time they were tears of relief rather than despair. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Yes, I would like that very much. Thank you." "Good," Zachary said, standing. Finish your soup and then we will head out to the ranch. You look like you could use a proper rest as well as a proper meal. Zelda picked up her spoon again, eating the rest of the soup slowly and carefully. When she was done, Clara came over with a concerned expression. "You take care of this girl, Zachary Vaughn," she said firmly. "She has been through enough." "I will, Clara," Zachary promised. "You have my word on that." The ride out to the ranch took about 40 minutes, with Zelda sitting beside Zachary in his wagon. The landscape around Gunnison was beautiful in the summer, with mountains rising in the distance and wildflowers dotting the meadows. Zachary kept up a steady stream of gentle conversation, telling her about the ranch and the cattle he raised, but not pressing her when she was too tired to respond much. When they arrived, Zelda was surprised by how well-maintained everything looked. The house was a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch, and the barn and outbuildings all looked sturdy and freshly painted. There were flower beds near the house that were somewhat overgrown, but clearly had been lovingly tended at some point. "My mother planted those roses," Zachary said, noticing her gaze. "She passed away 5 years ago, and I have tried to keep them going, but I am afraid I do not have her touch with flowers." Zelda felt a pang of sympathy. "I am sorry about your mother. Were you close?" "Very," Zachary said simply. He helped her down from the wagon, and she noticed again how gentle his hands were, supporting her without being presumptuous. "Come on, I will show you the house." The interior was just as solid as the exterior, with well-made furniture and large windows that let in plenty of light. It was also, Zelda noticed, clearly in need of a woman's touch. There was dust on most of the surfaces, and the dishes from breakfast were still sitting on the kitchen table. But it was clean in a fundamental way, not dirty so much as merely neglected. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the right," Zachary said. "Why do not you go up and rest for a while? There is a basin and pitcher of water up there if you want to wash up. I will be outside tending to some things, but I will come get you in a few hours for supper." Zelda nodded gratefully and climbed the stairs, which creaked slightly under her feet. The room Zachary had indicated was small but comfortable, with a single bed covered in a faded quilt, a dresser, and a washstand. The window looked out over the ranch, and Zelda could see Zachary walking toward the barn, his stride confident and purposeful. She poured water into the basin and washed her face and hands, marveling at how different she felt already. Just a few hours ago, she had been collapsed in the street, certain that she was going to die alone and forgotten. Now she had a job, a place to sleep, and the promise of regular meals. It felt almost too good to be true, and some part of her waited for the other shoe to drop. But exhaustion overwhelmed her caution, and she lay down on the bed, intending to rest for just a few minutes. Instead, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, her body finally able to relax for the first time in weeks. When she woke, the light streaming through the window had shifted to the golden glow of late afternoon. There was a gentle knock on her door, and Zachary's voice called, "Zelda, are you awake? Supper is ready if you are feeling up to it." Zelda sat up, smoothing her hair and dress as best she could. "I am awake. I will be right down." She found Zachary in the kitchen, dishing stew into bowls. It was clear he had made the meal himself, and while it was not fancy, it smelled wonderful. He had also set the table properly, with napkins and silverware, and there was a pitcher of water with actual glasses. "I am sorry I fell asleep for so long," Zelda said as she sat down at the table. "I did not mean to shirk my responsibilities already." Zachary waved off her concern. "You are not shirking anything. Today was about making sure you got some rest and some food. Tomorrow you can start work if you are feeling up to it, but for now, just focus on recovering. Your body has been through a lot." They ate in companionable silence for a while, and Zelda found herself relaxing despite her natural wariness. The stew was simple but hearty, with chunks of beef and potatoes and carrots, and she ate slowly, mindful of not overwhelming her stomach. She could feel strength slowly returning to her body, the fog of starvation beginning to lift. "Can I ask you something?" Zelda said finally, setting down her spoon. "Why did you help me? You do not know me, and plenty of other people in town just walked past me today without a second glance." Zachary was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "My father used to say that you can judge a man's character by how he treats those who cannot do anything for him. I saw someone who needed help, and I was in a position to help. It seemed like the right thing to do." He paused, then added more quietly, "And maybe because I know what it is like to feel alone. After my mother died, my father just sort of gave up. He died 2 years later, and people said it was pneumonia, but I think it was really just a broken heart. I had the ranch to focus on, which helped, but there were days when the loneliness was almost unbearable. So maybe I helped you partly because I wish someone had been there to help him when he needed it." Zelda felt her heart constrict with sympathy. "I am sorry. That must have been very difficult." "It was," Zachary admitted. "But it also taught me the value of kindness. So when I saw you today, I could not just walk past. I had to at least try to help." They finished their meal, and Zachary insisted on cleaning up while Zelda sat at the table, still building her strength. When the dishes were done, he showed her the rest of the house, pointing out where everything was kept and explaining the general routine of the ranch. His explanations were patient and thorough, never making her feel stupid for not knowing something. Over the next few days, Zelda settled into her new life at the ranch. Zachary was true to his word about feeding her regularly, always making sure she had 3 solid meals a day. He was also remarkably patient about how long it took her to recover her strength, never pushing her to do more than she was capable of. For the first few days, her stomach continued to adjust to regular food. Zachary was careful to give her smaller portions more frequently, understanding that her stomach had shrunk during her time without proper nutrition. He would watch her eat with a quiet satisfaction, as if seeing her finish a meal gave him genuine pleasure. "You do not have to watch me eat," Zelda said one morning, a bit self-consciously as she worked her way through a plate of eggs and ham. "I am not watching you eat," Zachary protested, but there was a slight flush on his cheeks that suggested otherwise. "I am just making sure you are getting enough. You are still too thin." Zelda looked down at herself. It was true that her dresses hung loose on her frame, her collarbones too prominent, her wrists looking fragile and delicate. "I suppose you are right, but I am getting better thanks to you." "Thanks to food," Zachary corrected. "And time. Your body just needs a chance to heal." As the days turned into weeks, Zelda began to take over more of the household duties. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, washing windows and beating rugs and organizing the kitchen until everything gleamed. She took over the cooking as well, and discovered that she enjoyed it, experimenting with the ingredients in the pantry and the vegetables from the garden to create meals that were far better than Zachary's simple fare. Zachary, for his part, seemed delighted with the changes. He would come in from working on the ranch and stop in the doorway of whatever room she was cleaning, a small smile playing at his lips as he took in the transformation. And at mealtimes, he would savor every bite, often going back for seconds and complimenting her cooking with genuine enthusiasm. "This is incredible," he said one evening over a beef roast with potatoes and carrots. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother taught me," Zelda said, feeling a bittersweet pang at the memory. She said that cooking was an art as much as a necessity, and that a good meal could make even the hardest day feel manageable. "She would have liked you, I think. She always appreciated people who were kind. Zachary's expression softened. I would have liked to meet her. She raised a remarkable daughter. Zelda felt heat rising to her cheeks at the compliment, and she quickly changed the subject, asking about his plans for the cattle. But she found herself thinking about his words later that night as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. It had been a long time since anyone had said something kind about her, and even longer since she had felt valued. As summer progressed into early fall, the dynamic between them began to shift in subtle ways. Zelda found herself looking forward to the moments when Zachary would come in from the ranch, dusty and tired, but always with a smile for her. She began to notice little things about him, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the careful way he handled the horses, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to the barn cats that lived in the loft. Zachary, too, seemed increasingly aware of her presence. He began finding excuses to linger in the house, helping her with tasks that she could easily have done herself. He would carry the heavy water buckets for her without being asked, or stay to dry the dishes while she washed them, their hands occasionally brushing in the soapy water. One afternoon in September, Zelda was in the garden picking the last of the tomatoes when Zachary appeared beside her, his hat in his hands. I have to go into town tomorrow to pick up some supplies, he said. I was wondering if you would like to come with me. I thought maybe you could pick out some fabric or something for yourself. You have been wearing the same 2 dresses since you got here, and I know they are getting worn. Zelda looked down at her dress, which was indeed showing signs of wear. I do not have money for fabric, she said carefully. I have not received my wages yet. I know, Zachary said. I was thinking of it as an advance on your wages, or a bonus for doing such a good job. The house has never looked better and your cooking is amazing. You have earned it. Zelda wanted to protest, but the truth was that she desperately needed new clothes. And the thought of going into town with Zachary, of spending the day with him away from the ranch, made her heart beat a little faster. If you are sure it would not be an imposition, she said slowly. I am sure, Zachary said firmly. We will leave first thing in the morning. The trip into Gunnison the next day was pleasant, with the autumn air crisp and cool and the aspens beginning to turn gold on the mountainsides. Zachary kept up a steady conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the area. Zelda found herself laughing more than she had in months, charmed by his dry sense of humor, and the way he seemed to see the lighter side of everything. At the mercantile, Zachary insisted on buying her enough fabric for 3 new dresses, as well as thread and buttons and all the notions she would need. When she protested that it was too much, he simply shook his head and told the shopkeeper to add it to his account. You work hard, he said as they loaded the packages into the wagon. You deserve to have nice things. They stopped at Clara's restaurant for lunch, and Clara greeted Zelda with obvious delight. Look at you, she exclaimed. You have got some color in your cheeks now. Zachary must be feeding you properly. He has been very kind, Zelda said, smiling. I do not know what I would have done without his help. That is our Zachary, Clara said warmly. He has always had a good heart. His mother would be proud of the man he has become. On the ride back to the ranch, Zelda found herself studying Zachary's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the capable hands holding the reins. She realized with a start that somewhere along the way, her gratitude had begun to transform into something deeper. She cared about him, not just as an employer or a benefactor, but as a man. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. That evening, as she prepared supper, she found herself taking extra care with the meal, wanting everything to be perfect. She made a chicken pie with a flaky crust and biscuits and an apple cobbler with the apples from the tree behind the house. When Zachary came in and saw the spread, his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "What is the occasion?" he asked, washing his hands at the basin. "No occasion," Zelda said, trying to keep her voice light. "I just wanted to make something special to thank you for the fabric and for being so kind to me." They sat down to eat, and the meal was everything Zelda had hoped it would be. But halfway through, Zachary set down his fork and looked at her seriously. "Zelda, I need to tell you something," he said, and her heart began to pound with anxiety. Was he going to tell her she had to leave? That she had done something wrong? "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Zachary ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I have been thinking about this for a while now, and I have tried to ignore it because you have been through so much and the last thing you need is me complicating things. But I cannot keep pretending anymore." He paused, meeting her eyes. "I have developed feelings for you, Zelda. Real feelings. And I know it is probably inappropriate given that I am your employer and you are my housekeeper, but I needed you to know. I understand if you do not feel the same way, or if you think I am taking advantage of the situation. I will not pressure you or make things uncomfortable, but I had to be honest with you." Zelda stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. For a moment she could not speak, overwhelmed by relief and joy and a dozen other emotions she could not name. "You have feelings for me," she finally managed to say. "Yes," Zachary said simply. "I think I have since the day I found you in town. There was something about you, even in your worst moment, that drew me to you. And getting to know you these past few months, seeing your strength and your kindness and your spirit, has only made those feelings stronger. I am falling in love with you, Zelda. I might already be there." Tears sprang to Zelda's eyes, but this time they were happy tears. "I have feelings for you too," she whispered. "I have been trying to tell myself it was just gratitude, but it is more than that. You make me feel safe and valued and happy. When you are in the room, everything feels brighter. I think I am falling in love with you too." Zachary's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen on him, and he stood, coming around the table to take her hands in his. "Really? You mean it, really?" Zelda said, laughing through her tears. "I mean it." He pulled her gently to her feet, and for a moment they just stood there, hands clasped, looking at each other. Then, slowly and carefully, Zachary cupped her face in his hands and leaned down to kiss her. It was soft and sweet and tender, full of promise and hope, and Zelda felt as if every broken piece of her was suddenly being put back together. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "So what happens now?" Zelda asked softly. "Now," Zachary said, "we take things slow. I want to court you properly, Zelda. I want to do this right. And when the time is right, I want to ask you to marry me, but only if that is what you want too." "It is," Zelda said, feeling more certain of anything than she had in her entire life. "It is exactly what I want." The next few months were the happiest of Zelda's life. Zachary courted her with old-fashioned care, bringing her wildflowers from the meadows and taking her on picnics by the creek. They would sit together on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, and Zachary would hold her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. The physical aspect of their relationship developed slowly and naturally. Zachary was always respectful, never pushing her beyond what she was comfortable with, but there was an undeniable chemistry between them that grew stronger with each passing day. His kisses became deeper and more passionate, and Zelda found herself responding with an enthusiasm that sometimes surprised her. But Zachary always pulled back before things went too far, reminding her that he wanted to wait until they were married. "I respect you too much to compromise you," he said one evening when they were wrapped in each other's arms on the porch swing. "I want our wedding night to be special, not something we rush into. Zelda appreciated his restraint, even as her body ached for more. She had never felt desire like this before, had never understood what it meant to want someone so completely. But she trusted Zachary, and she knew that waiting would make it all the sweeter when the time finally came. As winter approached, Zachary began talking about marriage in more concrete terms. One evening in November, as the first snow began to fall outside, he took her hands and led her to sit by the fireplace. His expression was serious but warm as he knelt down on one knee. "Zelda Brennan," he said, his voice steady and sure, "these past few months with you have been the best of my life. You have brought light and warmth and love into this house, and I cannot imagine my future without you in it. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Zelda was crying again, but they were tears of pure joy. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, of course I will marry you." Zachary pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small sapphire that had belonged to his mother. "I know it is not much," he said as he slipped it onto her finger. "But my father gave this to my mother when they got engaged, and she wore it every day of her life. I think she would be happy for you to have it." Zelda looked down at the ring, which fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "It is beautiful," she whispered, "and I am honored to wear it." They were married in January of 1884, in a small ceremony at the church in Gunnison with Clara and a few of the other townspeople as witnesses. Zelda wore a new dress she had made from cream-colored wool, with lace at the collar and cuffs, and she carried a small bouquet of dried flowers. Zachary wore his best suit, and the look in his eyes as she walked down the aisle took her breath away. The ceremony was simple but moving, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed her with such tenderness and love that Zelda felt as if her heart might overflow. They held a small reception at Clara's restaurant, where their friends toasted their happiness and wished them well. That night, back at the ranch which was now officially their home, Zachary carried Zelda over the threshold and up the stairs to his bedroom, which would now be their bedroom. He set her down gently, his hands trembling slightly as he began to undo the buttons of her dress. "Are you nervous?" Zelda asked softly, reaching up to touch his face. "A little," Zachary admitted. "I want this to be perfect for you. I want to make you happy." "You already make me happy," Zelda said, pulling him down for a kiss. "Just being with you makes me happy." They made love slowly and carefully, Zachary taking his time to ensure her comfort and pleasure. It was awkward at first, as first times often are, but there was so much love and tenderness between them that the awkwardness quickly gave way to passion. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Zachary's hand stroking her hair as she rested her head on his chest. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Zelda whispered back, feeling more content and safe than she had ever felt in her life. The first year of their marriage was a time of adjustment and discovery. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, figured out how to navigate disagreements, and built a life together that was based on mutual respect and deep affection. Zachary continued to run the ranch with skill and dedication, and Zelda threw herself into making their house a true home. She expanded the garden, planting vegetables and herbs and flowers, and learned how to preserve and can so that they would have food through the long winter months. She also began to help more with the ranch work, feeding the chickens and collecting eggs, and even learning how to milk the cow. Zachary taught her to ride, and she would sometimes accompany him when he checked on the cattle, the two of them riding side by side through the beautiful Colorado landscape. That first winter was harsh, with heavy snows that sometimes kept them isolated for days at a time. But Zelda did not mind. She and Zachary would sit by the fire in the evenings, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's company. Sometimes they would make love in front of the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on their skin, and Zelda would marvel at how completely her life had changed in just 1 year. In the spring, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, with the nausea and fatigue that seemed to come out of nowhere, but she waited until she was certain before telling Zachary. When she finally did, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around and laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," Zelda confirmed, laughing at his excitement. "In the fall, I think. Late September or early October." Zachary immediately became even more protective than usual, insisting that she rest more and not overwork herself. Zelda found it a bit overwhelming at times, but she was also touched by his concern. He would come in from working on the ranch multiple times a day just to check on her, and at night he would fall asleep with his hand on her belly, as if he could already feel their child growing inside her. As the pregnancy progressed, Zelda's body changed in ways both wonderful and uncomfortable. Her belly swelled, and she felt the first fluttering movements of the baby in July. Zachary was entranced, spending hours with his hand on her stomach, feeling their child move and kick. He would talk to the baby, telling stories and making promises about the life they would have together. "I am going to teach you to ride," he would say to her belly, "and how to rope cattle. And your mother is going to teach you to cook and garden and all the things I am hopeless at. We are going to be a family, and I am going to love you so much." Zelda would listen with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by the depth of love she felt for this man and the child they had created together. Her own childhood had been loving but marked by poverty and hardship. She was determined that their child would have a better life, full of security and love and opportunity. In late September, as the aspens turned gold and the air grew crisp with the promise of autumn, Zelda went into labor. It was long and difficult, with hours of pain that left her exhausted and frightened. But Zachary was there the whole time, holding her hand and encouraging her, and never leaving her side even when the midwife suggested he might want to wait downstairs. "I am not leaving her," he said firmly. "She is my wife, and I am staying right here." Finally, after nearly 12 hours of labor, their son was born. He came into the world with a loud cry that filled the room, and when the midwife placed him in Zelda's arms, she felt a love so fierce and overwhelming that it took her breath away. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air as he cried. Zachary looked down at his son with wonder and awe, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "He is beautiful," he whispered. "He is perfect. You are amazing, Zelda. You did so well." They named him Thomas, after Zelda's father, with the middle name of James after Zachary's father. Little Thomas was a healthy, hungry baby who kept them up at all hours with his demands for food and attention, but neither of them minded. Zachary would walk the floor with his son in the middle of the night, singing old lullabies his mother had sung to him, while Zelda watched with a full heart. The early months of parenthood were exhausting but joyful. Zelda marveled at how natural Zachary was with their son, how he was never squeamish about dirty diapers or crying fits. He threw himself into fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything else, and watching him with Thomas made Zelda fall in love with him all over again. As Thomas grew from a baby into a toddler, their life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper, and Zachary hired a couple of ranch hands to help with the work, which meant he could spend more time with his family. They would take Thomas on walks around the property, showing him the horses and cattle and teaching him about the natural world. When Thomas was 2, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was less nervous, having been through it once before. Their daughter was born in the summer of 1887, an easy birth compared to Thomas's marathon labor. They named her Clara, after the kind restaurant owner who had been such a good friend to them, and she was a sweet-tempered baby who seemed to smile from the moment she was born. With 2 children to care for, life became even busier. But Zelda had never been happier. She would look around the dinner table at night, at her husband and children, at the home they had built together, and feel a profound sense of gratitude. Just a few years ago, she had been starving and alone, certain that she had no future. Now she had everything she had ever dreamed of and more. As the years passed, they added 2 more children to their family, another son named William and a daughter named Grace. Their house rang with the sound of children's laughter and the chaos of family life. Zachary expanded the ranch, buying more land and more cattle, and they became one of the most prosperous families in the area. But prosperity never changed them. Zachary remained the same kind, gentle man he had always been, and Zelda never forgot what it was like to be hungry and alone. They were generous to those less fortunate, often hiring drifters or people down on their luck, giving them a chance to earn their way just as Zachary had given Zelda a chance all those years ago. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Zelda with a trip to Denver, just the 2 of them, leaving the children in Clara's capable care. They stayed in a fancy hotel and ate in nice restaurants and went to see a play, feeling young and carefree again. On their last night in the city, as they lay in bed together, Zachary pulled Zelda close and kissed her forehead. "Do you remember the day we met?" he asked softly. "Of course I do," Zelda said. "I was collapsed outside the mercantile and you came and helped me. I remember thinking that you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even though you were half-starved and desperate," Zachary said. "And I remember feeling like I had to help you, like it was the most important thing I would ever do. I had no idea that helping you that day would lead to all of this, to the life we have built together. But I am so grateful it did. You are my best friend, my partner, the love of my life. These past 10 years with you have been the best years of my life, and I cannot wait to see what the next 10 bring." Zelda felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I love you so much," she whispered. "You saved my life that day, Zachary. You gave me hope when I had none, and you showed me what real love looks like. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful that you walked past that mercantile when you did." They made love that night with the same passion and tenderness they had always shared, and Zelda felt once again that sense of complete rightness, of being exactly where she was meant to be. When they returned home, they were greeted by their children rushing out to meet them, all talking at once about everything they had done while their parents were away. Zachary scooped up the 2 youngest while Thomas and Clara hugged Zelda, and they all went inside together, a noisy, happy family. That evening, as Zelda prepared supper in the kitchen she had come to love so well, she paused to look out the window at her family. Zachary was outside with the children, showing them something in the barn, and she could hear their excited voices drifting through the open door. The last rays of the setting sun painted everything in gold, and Zelda felt her heart swell with contentment. She thought back to that terrible day in July of 1883 when she had collapsed on the street, her stomach cramping with hunger, her future looking impossibly bleak. She remembered the kindness in Zachary's eyes as he helped her up, the gentle way he had fed her that first meal, taking care not to overwhelm her shrunken stomach. He had reminded her slowly and gently what it felt like to be full, to be cared for, to be loved. And he had continued to fill her life in every way that mattered. He had filled her stomach with good food, her home with laughter and children, and her heart with a love that grew stronger with each passing year. The hunger that had once defined her existence was now just a distant memory, replaced by abundance in every form. Zelda smiled to herself and returned to preparing supper, knowing that when it was ready, they would all gather around the table together, sharing food and stories and love. It was a simple thing, really, this daily ritual of eating together. But for someone who had once known true starvation, who had forgotten what a full meal felt like, it was also a miracle. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Zelda and Zachary sat together on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Zachary had his arm around her shoulders and Zelda rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Zelda said. "How different my life could have been if you had not stopped that day. How close I came to giving up entirely." "But you did not give up," Zachary said. "You were strong enough to keep going, even when everything seemed hopeless. That strength is what drew me to you in the first place." "I just provided the opportunity. You did the rest." "We did the rest," Zelda corrected gently. "Together." "Together," Zachary agreed, pulling her closer. "Always together." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, surrounded by the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. The cattle lowed softly in the distance. An owl hooted from the barn, and somewhere a coyote called out to the rising moon. It was peaceful and perfect, and Zelda knew that she would remember this moment for the rest of her life. Inside the house, their children slept safely in their beds, their bellies full and their hearts secure in the knowledge that they were loved. Outside, the ranch that Zachary had built and that they now ran together stretched out in all directions, a testament to hard work and dedication and faith in the future. And here on the porch, in the circle of her husband's arms, Zelda felt the final pieces of her old life fall away, leaving only the present and the promise of many more years to come. She had been saved by a cowboy's kindness, fed by his gentle care, and loved by his steadfast heart. Her stomach had forgotten what a full meal felt like, but Zachary had reminded it, slowly and gently, just as he had reminded her heart what it felt like to be truly full of love and hope and joy. And for that, she would be grateful every day for the rest of her life. As the years continued to pass, their love only deepened. They weathered the challenges that life brought them, supporting each other through difficult times and celebrating together during the good ones. Their children grew up strong and healthy, carrying forward the values of kindness and hard work that their parents had instilled in them. Thomas became a fine rancher in his own right, eventually taking over more and more of the daily operations as Zachary grew older. Clara married a kind young man from town and started a family of her own. William showed a talent for horse training and started a side business breeding and selling quality horses. And Grace, the youngest, surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, opening a small school on their property to educate the children of the ranch hands and neighboring families. Zachary and Zelda became grandparents, watching with joy as their children's children ran through the same fields where their parents had played. They grew old together gracefully, their hair turning gray, their faces gaining lines, but their love remaining as strong as it had been that first day outside the mercantile. On warm summer evenings, you could still find them sitting together on the porch swing, hands intertwined, watching the sun set over the mountains. And sometimes, when Zelda would serve supper to their extended family, with children and grandchildren crowded around the expanded dining table, Zachary would catch her eye across the room and smile, and she would know exactly what he was thinking. They were thinking of that first meal, when her stomach had been so empty she thought she might die. They were thinking of how far they had come, how much they had built together. They were thinking of the love that had sustained them through everything, and the family they had created out of kindness and hope and determination. And Zelda would smile back, her heart as full as her stomach, knowing that she had been blessed beyond measure. The hungry, desperate girl she had once been felt like a distant memory, transformed entirely by the love of a good man who had seen her worth even at her lowest moment. This was her life now, abundant and rich and full of love. And it had all started with a cowboy who stopped when others walked past, who fed her slowly and gently, and who taught her not just what it meant to have a full stomach, but what it meant to have a full heart and a full life. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. And every night, as Zelda drifted off to sleep in Zachary's arms, she whispered a prayer of gratitude for the chance encounter that had changed everything, for the man who had saved her life, and for the beautiful life they had created together in the wild and wonderful landscape of Colorado. Their story, born from hunger and desperation, had become a testament to the transformative power of kindness, patience, and true love.